where current events meet culture.
Get It Right with Margaret Hoover.
I would now like to welcome to the program James Dozier, who is the Executive Director of Citizens for Responsible Energy Solutions, CRES, as he likes to call it. Now, you all know that on this program, I have discussed in the past frankly, the need for Republicans to develop a really robust environmental policy. And this is one thing that has just been lacking tremendously, I think. And as we gear up in 2016, there is this opportunity for debate and for Republicans to offer real solutions that are going to be competitive solutions. And James is one of these people who's working on environmental policy from the center right and had an op-ed. I saw it yesterday in Roll Call. I don't know if you all are familiar with Roll Call. Of course, it is the publication of repute on Capitol Hill. Of course, the Hill would dispute that. The Hill is the main competitor of Roll Call. But James, it was a great op-ed about Republican primary voters, a poll that CRES has recently commissioned about Republican primary voters' attitudes on the environment. And it was the revelation is that what we think about Republicans in the environment, and especially Republican primary voters in the environment, is not necessarily true. So with that, welcome to Get It Right. Thank you for joining me here at SiriusXM Insight Channel 121. I'm really looking forward to having a conversation with you about what a conservative environmental policy can look like.
Thank you, Margaret. I'm really excited to be here to be talking with you today on what is really an important issue, not just for the party, but for the country and the future.
Well, it's so true. And I think you said it perfectly in your op-ed. You said, well, first of all, let's just talk about, what is CRES? Tell us what CRES is.
CRES is a grassroots campaign that seeks to engage conservative activists, thought leaders, policymakers in a dialogue about our nation's energy and environmental future. What we know is that Washington has spent a lot of time arguing about the things that divide them at a time when we need our policymakers to be bringing folks together and having a serious conversation about energy policy. I mean, we're so fortunate to be living in a time where we have abundant sources of energy, from traditional sources to new technologies that are bringing renewable sources like wind, solar, and hydro to market.
Right.
And what we need is both parties at the table. We need conservatives to be offering solutions so that we have the policies that spur that innovation as opposed to regulation as being the only way forward.
So you and I were talking about this a little bit before, but let's just first talk about the politics of this, because you and I both know, and this audience knows, that the environment has become a wedge issue in politics, and Republicans are on the losing end. How has that happened, and why has that happened? Because you and I also both know that the history of the environmental movement is actually founded and grounded in the Republican Party, from Teddy Roosevelt to Richard Nixon and the founding of the EPA to even as recently as the 90s, you had a lot of Republicans, governors and mayors in the Northeast and on the coasts who were unabashed, unforgiving environmentalists. Even George W. Bush, when he became president, really made a case for a conservative environmental policy. I think that was, pre 9/11. I think things kind of got off track in terms of him hoping to remake environmental policy from the right after 9/11 happened. But there is this desire for Republicans, at least it seems to me, to not be pigeonholed as the anti-science, anti-environmental party, but we've somehow lost the political fight.
Yeah, I think the division is a great media narrative and certainly a great narrative to be pushed from the left. But the fact of the matter is the party is not monolithic in some kind of opposition to taking action.
Yeah.
As you said, we are a party of conservationists, and we have seen our Republican leaders in the House and the Senate and governors, as you point out, take positive actions. Recently, Senator Kelly Ayotte and Senator Richard Burr worked very hard for the
New Hampshire, North Carolina
for the renewal of the Land and Water Conservation Fund. We've also seen actions taken in recent votes this year in a Republican-controlled Senate in favor of taking action on climate change and acknowledging it as a serious issue that we need to address.
No, that's right. You point this out in your op-ed that in January, 15 Republican senators voted in support of an amendment to the Keystone Pipeline. I mean, Keystone was just sort of the passing matter here, but there was an amendment that acknowledged that climate change was real and that it was anthropomorphic. Is that the right word? That it's that humans are impacting the climate. 15 senators on the Republican side all acknowledged that.
And I think some of the kind of important takeaways. Not only was it 15 Republican senators, but they were from across the country.
Yeah, Rand Paul from Kentucky, Lindsey Graham from South Carolina, Kelly Ayotte from North Carolina, New Hampshire, Mark Kirk, Illinois, John McCain, Arizona, Lisa Murkowski, Alaska, Rob Portman, Ohio, Patrick Toomey, Pennsylvania, totally all across the country.
And what that says to me is they're also looking at what you said before, the political element of this, the polls, but also the responsibility we have to future generations.
Absolutely.
The decisions we make today are going to make decisions down the road a lot easier. So if we are going to transition to a cleaner future, if we are going to eventually lower the amount of carbon that we're emitting into the atmosphere, we have to start working at it now. Otherwise, as we've seen with things like Social Security, if we continue to kick it down the road, it's going to become a more painful and a more difficult and limited in our options to correct what we've done.
So tell me about, you all just put a poll in the field to poll the sensibilities of early Republican primary voters in 2 states, New Hampshire and South Carolina. Now, I have to tell you, I was surprised by some of the results of your findings that you wrote about, and I'd love to dig deeper in them, because I would have imagined that New Hampshire voters certainly would have been the more green sort of Republican voters. But in South Carolina, what you ended up having, and I'd love for you to share more about your findings, is a large majority of primary voters in both of these cases on the Republican side are open to environmental policy, legislation, and the federal government taking steps to reduce emissions that cause global climate change.
Yeah, I think the big kind of headline takeaway was, primary voters are ready for Republicans to lead on environmental issues. They're ready to have this conversation, and they're tired of.
Because that is not the message we get in the media, though, James. I mean, what we hear is Republicans don't. You see the sort of circus on the stage with all 20 Republicans on the stage, and you see none of them raising their hands when they say, "Is climate change real?" I mean, that's the caricature of Republicans. But here you're saying you guys did a poll in the field in New Hampshire and in South Carolina. They all believe that something needs to be done on climate change. Not all of them. Majorities.
Well, and that's true. It's strong majorities. And I would also say amongst the people in the field, you have a number of them, Lindsey Graham, Rand Paul, Jeb Bush, Chris Christie.
Well, I was referring to 2012 circus.
No,
yeah, but this field, you're right.
Is,
this time you have more responsible, I think.
But it builds to the narrative of it's not just elected leaders in Congress. It's not just the polling. It's now also the candidates. We're starting to see a shift towards support and acknowledgement and wanting to have a conversation. And it's not, and you're right, and it's not everyone in the party, but it's a sizable majority in the party that are ready to take an action.
And they're not getting press. Like we need to get them more press, damn it, because I'm sick of Republicans being pigeonholed as being anti-environment. But that's why I found your op-ed so heartening, and also the poll you did. So tell us about the poll.
Absolutely. Well, we went to South Carolina and New Hampshire, and we tested a series of reasons for taking action to address climate change. We even tested the votes that we talked about earlier on climate change in the Senate to get a sense of where voters actually are. And
again, only Republican primary voters?
This is only Republican primary voters.
Okay.
So this is a sample that definitely skews to the right. And, I have to say, I wasn't really surprised when the numbers came back from New Hampshire and South Carolina and that they were both strong. I mean, first of all, Republicans, we all enjoy clean air and clean water. We also enjoy the outdoors. These aren't issues that only liberals enjoy. This is something that all Americans enjoy.
Sure.
And you've had fantastic thought leadership in both states on these issues. Lindsey Graham, for a long time, has been talking about the importance of addressing climate change, the impact that rising waters have on the coasts in South Carolina. and the impact that it has on the natural wonders that they have in South Carolina. And in New Hampshire, there's a strong tradition, a strong New Hampshire Republican tradition of conservation going from Judd Gregg to today with Kelly Ayotte in the United States Senate. So it's not a surprise that they've been talking about this from a center-right perspective for so long. I think what was a big takeaway for me was when we asked Republican primary voters their reactions to both Senators Ayotte and Graham voting for an amendment that said that climate change was real and that humans were having a significant impact. Majority of Republican primary voters in both states said that they agreed with that. And they thought it was time that we started taking action on those. That's really encouraging to me, as well as numbers that show that millennials, younger Republicans, 18 to 34, really consider this a serious issue. It's an issue about, things we always talk about, national security, but it's also an important issue about the economy, the jobs that they're going to have going forward. In New Hampshire, clean technology employs about 13 to 20,000 individuals, not just from the generating,
really?
But from the production.
What clean technology? Like wind, solar, what?
It's everything from wind, solar, how you dispose of garbage. I mean, clean technology is finding new ways of lowering our footprint in the United States. And those jobs pay about 50% higher than the state average. So we're talking about high-paying jobs that you can't outsource to another country,
right,
and having them here in America. And, it is time to build a new American energy economy. And it's natural gas is part of that, nuclear is part of that, as well as solar and wind power.
So, I mean, you're singing my song. I totally agree with you. What I love is, so you sort of crystallize this in the third paragraph. You say, the fact is that in early primary states, there's a sizable cohort of the GOP primary electorate that is tired of ceding the issues of environmental sustainability to the left, and that the coalition of persuadable voters, which is, suburban women, Republican-leaning independents, and millennials, they want to hear the GOP offer conservative solutions that seize upon the free market to create jobs, protect our dollars, and preserve our climate. I mean, amen to that. What is the strategy for the campaign for CRES to sort of unwind the fact that this has become a wedge issue? And I mean, you and I were talking about this a little bit earlier, but sort of walk us through this. How do you, because, part of the information I would imagine, part of the reason you did this poll is that, there are members of the Senate and members of the House of Representatives, people who are in leadership positions in their states, who have heard sort of the echo chamber, and they have seen, the circus from 2012 all raise their hands, or none of them raise their hands and say they believe in climate change. And so they probably think and are afraid of the primary electorate. And so they're probably afraid to sort of speak truth to power, or speak the truth, or maybe what they think, or, follow the science or their briefings about the climate. Or maybe like they're listening to talk radio. I don't know what it is. So I would imagine part of your strategy is this poll, and then sharing the results of this poll with elected officials or influencers. I mean, is that part of how you go about doing this, or?
It is, and if they're listening to talk radio, I hope they're listening to you every day. The country would certainly be moving in the right direction. But you're right. It's how we talk about the issue is just as, if not more so, as important as the issue itself. And a lot of what we're trying to show Republican elected officials is we can talk about solutions. We can talk about clean energy. We can talk about how we make our nation more secure by creating more energy here at home. And we can talk about climate change. There are ways to do it, and there are various reasons why people want to take action. But at the same time, it's okay to be a little bit unsure. It's okay to say, I want to support, a new nuclear facility in our state or a new wind farm in our state because it will create jobs. And that's fine if that's why you want to engage on this. Where CRES is coming from is for those members who believe that climate change is real, for those voters who do, or for those members who aren't sure, or those voters who aren't sure, this is about getting to the solutions that will ensure that we do have a future of clean air and clean water. So there's a part of this that's, Republicans like myself who believe that it is real, humans are having an impact, we should do something about it. But there's another element of this is, just because we can pollute doesn't mean that we have to. And for people who do enjoy lakes, streams, the woods, and hunting and fishing and all the things that the outdoors offer, there are ways to get past this debate that seems to want to create a division and start talking about policy solutions. And what we are trying to do is say, look, the Republican Party is hungry and ready to talk about this issue. They are not monolithic on the environment. This is not just a Democrat issue. This is an issue that people in both parties want to engage in. And there's an element of this that is, if we're not at the table, then we're not offering our solutions. We're starting to see in Congress small steps being taken to move forward. One of these is recently Senator Rob Portman from Ohio and Senator Jeanne Shaheen from New Hampshire put forward an energy efficiency bill. And we've seen other elements of this efficiency.
So what was that? What was that bill? Tell me about it.
So what they were doing was coming up with a way to encourage buildings to become more energy efficient, to bring in the various technologies that are needed to control how much lighting you're using, to improve how much air conditioning you're using. What this is doing is it's saving these companies, businesses on their utility bills, which is a huge part of any company's overhead. So lowering the utility bill, which is a benefit to the company, but it also has the impact of less energy usage, means that we're putting less carbon into the atmosphere. And energy efficiency is something that can be applied across the federal government, across corporate America, and even by everyday Americans. I mean, this is something that can all do.
It's so just common sense. I mean, it seems to me. I mean, it's just like, it just sort of blows my mind. There's no argument here. Like, who could be against sort of being more energy efficient? But that's the sort of Western conservative in me that grew up turning off the water and turning out the lights and conserving the energy. And my husband calls me a hippie.
But this is a part about finding a place where we can get started. We have to start somewhere, and you say it's common sense, but it's also an important common sense effort that is getting bipartisan support, is getting support.
Not to diminish the. Sorry, I'm not trying to diminish the work.
I'm not saying that you are, but I think what is important is that it's beginning a conversation, and that's honestly where we're at. If we're going to have a national energy plan that addresses our environmental future, it's probably a couple years off, and we need to start the conversation now.
When you say it's a couple years off, I mean, we talked about this a little bit before the show started. Your view is that in order to get, or the view of CRES is that in order to mobilize the political support on the right to be able to garner enough support legislatively for legislative action, it's going to take building up the confidence of these Republicans over the next couple of years so that they believe that they can politically sustain it.
It's partially that they feel that they have the power and the backing to move forward with it, but it's also we need Republicans and conservatives at the table. We can't just let one party write the law. And it's beneficial to everyone that they're at the table. But we had a debate about this in the country in 2009, and I think that is a starting point, and we'll continue to have more conversations about policies, whether they be in the realm of
this is the Waxman bill, or Markey
right.
Waxman on the carbon trading. Was it carbon trading?
The cap and trade
bill. Yeah. Which was a terrible bill. It was written by Democrats, for Democrats, by Democrats. Republicans were totally boxed out. You're exactly right. Republicans have to be at the table, or else you get bad legislation.
Exactly.
Sorry to be so partisan.
No.
But you do want it to be balanced, right? I mean, that's the point of a two-party system. Both parties have to be at the table putting forward ideas, and that's the point of competition. You want healthy competition of ideas so that the best ideas get in these bills. And of course, it doesn't always work. But if you have, if you have total supremacy of thought. Informing legislation, then this is the problem with the Affordable Care Act. Only Democrats signed and passed it. No Republicans participated. I mean, you don't get good legislation when you only have one ideology sort of governing sort of the movement and the thought process of legislative action. It just doesn't happen. That's why we have a two-party system, folks.
Well, and I would say on the political point as well, this isn't just about we're going to go out and do a bunch of polling and brief a bunch of elected officials. we're actually on the ground in New Hampshire. We have a campaign set up in New Hampshire, an educational campaign that's actually going out and engaging directly with voters themselves to engage them in a conversation about why this is important.
Talk to me about that. How so because you said you've met. You said at the end of the op-ed, it was on. I wanted to. I'm glad we're talking because I wanted to ask you more about it. You said in this at the Spring of New Hampshire, the GOP Leadership Summit, you met with hundreds of Republican activists who believe that now is the time for Republicans to lead on environmental issues. So what are you guys doing? You actually have a campaign set up in New Hampshire, and what's the goal?
We do. We have a campaign set up in New Hampshire, and the goal of the effort in the state is to raise the saliency of this issue with New Hampshire primary voters. So the first step was the research and the polling that you've seen. We used Target Point Consulting, a premier firm within the Republican Party, to do a micro-target and to tell us what New Hampshire voters are thinking and what this issue means to them. And so we've been on the ground communicating with voters directly. I was at the First in the Nation Summit. I got to speak at that summit. And, you know, the energy back from people on the ground was, it's time. You know, we need to hear from our presidential candidates about what they're going to do. We can't keep arguing past each other. We need to engage. So we have folks who are on the ground who are going to town hall meetings.
Well, that's the thing about are you doing New Hampshire because New Hampshire is so retail politics oriented? I mean, every single one of these people who's at that summit that hears you speak has the ability to show up at 20 town halls and ask every single Republican candidate who's traipsing through New Hampshire specific questions about what their environmental policies are going to be. I mean, there's more access in New Hampshire. I mean, next to Iowa. But you can really make an impact because it's such the representation and dialogue and retail politics is just the way it works in the primary place. That's really the way to get in and influence the debate, I think, is by just moving to New Hampshire.
Yeah, we have a rock star Republican leader in the state. His name's Mike Castaldo, and Mike has been going to town halls and forums and asking the candidates exactly what they would do as president to address our energy, economic, and climate security. And on our website at citizens4for.com, we've cataloged these interactions that he's had with these candidates.
Like you videotape them and put them up?
Yeah, these are all filmed and they're put up.
What's the website?
It's citizens4
Okay.
.com.
Okay. And so you can go to Citizens4 and you can see what candidates have said to the question, what are you going to do for energy and environmental policy?
Yeah. And what we're trying to do with this is, look, these are important issues. And these are important issues that can't be asked on a debate stage in a raise your hand if format. These are complicated issues. They impact our economy and our national security and our environment. And candidates need more than just, a 30-second spot to explain what they would do. This is such an incredible point in our history where we have such an abundance of sources. And it's a complicated issue, and they need to be given a format to explain exactly what they would do in their administrations and how they would tackle it.
Well, they need to be asked the question. So are you training activists to go out and ask all these candidates this question?
We are. We're out engaging with folks, having conversations with them, and having conversations with folks who have been active in the state. State Senator Gary Lambert has been working with us and helping us engage with the voters directly, as well as meeting grass tops folks. Senator Kelly Ayotte has been a true champion in the state, and CRES has had a fantastic relationship with her over the years. And it's really all about getting folks to engage and getting them to want to ask the questions, and at the same time, getting the candidates comfortable with expressing their views. When they know that Mike Castaldo is coming to talk to them, they know that Mike is a tried and true Republican. He's not going to try to, play gotcha with them. He's going to ask them a serious conversation. And the voters of New Hampshire, we're telling them to listen to these candidates and ask them to give you a serious answer back to this very pressing question. And so it's going to be partially training folks on the ground, sending them a lot of direct mail and online advertising and getting on the phones and going door to door. And what we're hoping for is that voters themselves will just naturally start asking these as candidates come to their doors, as candidates come to their communities and into their homes.
Well,
so that it's not just a couple of trained activists, but it's all New Hampshire Republican
but it's a whole
primaries.
network. It really is a sort of a grassroots uprising. Look, I wish you the best of luck with your endeavor. I think it is incredibly important, and I think New Hampshire really is. I love the New Hampshire strategy because that really is the place to go to influence the debate. If you or just have an issue like the environment and really want to influence the Republican field, that's the place to do it. And it is, it is a bit more moderate state, but surprised. I got to say, I found myself surprised by those early polling numbers of Republican primary voters in South Carolina too.
We will also be going into South Carolina as well over the summer and into the fall, so it won't just be in New Hampshire. And, Margaret, I will say this is certainly an exciting time to be a Republican and to be doing this work because we're just seeing fast growing momentum from the top to the bottom within our party. And I think what you're going to see over the next couple of years is some really solid, meaningful solutions that will enhance our innovation, will create higher paying American jobs, and will make us more energy and nationally secure. So I'm looking forward to the debate over the next couple of years and continuing to grow this effort. And we're just having a lot of fun doing it.
Well, James, thank you for coming on Get It Right to tell us about it. I really appreciate the work you're doing, and I look forward to following your success, because it's going to be a success, and hearing about it. And I hope you'll come back to Get It Right, and I hope you'll come back and share with us more of your polling, more of your successes, and maybe we'll even see some good questions and debates that yield some good answers. And if we get bad answers, I'm going to call you up to test for them.
Absolutely. Thank you, Margaret, and I hope you and your listeners will visit the site, citizens4.com, join us, sign up, stay in touch with us. We're going to continue to poll. We're going to continue to ask candidates questions. It's going to be the place to stay up to date on this issue over the course of the upcoming election.
Sounds great. Thanks so much, James. James Dozier, Executive Director for Citizens for Responsible